Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving into something that sounds like, honestly, it's right out of sci-fi. But I promise you, this is real. We're talking using AI to judge AI.
It's getting wild out there.
It really is. So
Uh,
we're talking LLM evaluators.
Mm.
Have you ever wondered, how do we even know if an AI is good at something? How do we know if it can write a good speech or summarize, a super complicated report?
right.
That's where this tech comes in.
It's a fascinating area. And, I think it really forces us to kind of confront this question of how do we evaluate complex tasks in general, right? Like, if you think about something like creative writing, what makes a story good? It's not always easy to put into words.
Oh,
Yet we're trying to build AI that can make those sorts of judgments.
and it's not even just stories, right?
Yeah.
It's like we've got LLMs writing code, writing news articles, trying to have nuanced conversations. And the old ways of evaluating them, like comparing their output to a single perfect human written text, they just they don't cut it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, those older methods worked fine when AI was mostly doing pretty simple, straightforward things. But now, we're asking these LLMs to be creative, to be insightful, even, like you said, to be persuasive. So we need a new generation of tools to even be able to evaluate how well they're doing.
Totally. Yeah, it's like how do you give a grade to something that can think for itself almost?
And that's where this idea of using LLMs themselves as judges
Whoa.
is becoming a really powerful approach.
Okay, so let's get into it. Eugene Yan's recent blog post, this is our guide for this deep dive. And he lays out some really, really important things to consider before you even start using these LLM evaluators.
Yeah.
It's like a pre-flight check, right?
Exactly. You've got to make sure you're not flying blind here.
For sure.
And the very first question, it seems deceptively simple, but it's so crucial, is what's the baseline? Like, what are we even comparing this AI's performance against? Is it human performance? Is it a previous generation of LLMs? That choice really sets the standard for what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and that seems like that would change, right? Depending on what you're evaluating, judging a chatbot got to be way different than judging an AI that's summarizing, financial documents or whatever.
Absolutely. And you'd have different expectations for each, right?
Totally, yeah.
So, in most of the research that's happening now, the focus is on comparing these LM evaluators to human judgment, right?
Okay.
Can we get these AIs to be as accurate as a human would be?
Interesting.
But it gets even trickier because even humans don't always agree on what's good.
Oh, for sure.
So then the question becomes, well, how do we make sure the AI is aligned with the right kind of human judgment?
Okay, so that's the baseline. That's step one. What's next on this pre-flight check?
So once you've figured out your baseline, then you got to figure out, okay, how are we actually going to score the LLM's performance? And this is where it gets a little bit into the weeds, but there are a few main approaches. So one is called direct scoring. And that's basically where the LLM evaluator, it just gives a rating, like a score, to a piece of text. You can kind of think of it like a teacher grading an essay.
So this speech is an 8 out of 10 on persuasiveness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Precisely. Then you've got something called pairwise comparison, and that's where the LLM evaluator, it looks at two different pieces of text and says, okay, based on these criteria, which one is better? It's kind of like those online polls where you have to pick which picture you like better.
Interesting.
So, picking the right method, it really depends on what aspect of the LLM's performance you're trying to measure.
Okay, so we've got the baseline, we've got how we're actually going to score it. What's the final piece of the puzzle here?
So the final thing we have to figure out is, what about the metrics? It's not enough to just have scores. We need to understand what those scores actually mean.
Nice.
Are we looking at how often the LM evaluator gets the right answer? If there even is a right answer.
Right.
Or are we more interested in how closely its judgments match up with what a human expert would say?
It's are we grading on a curve, or is there an absolute standard of quality? Honestly, this is where even I start to get a little
Yeah.
a little overwhelmed.
And rightfully so, because choosing the wrong metric can completely throw off how we understand an LLM's performance. It's if you were trying to measure temperature with a ruler,
Right.
you'll get numbers, but they're not going to tell you anything useful.
They're meaningless.
Ex-
It's kind of wild, right? We're designing these metrics to measure how well AI understands things that we ourselves, even as humans, struggle to define, what even is good writing?
It's a question for the ages, isn't it?
Right.
I'm waiting for the day when I can just like feed an email to an LLM evaluator and it's like, hey, you need to punch this up or whatever.
I think a lot of people would be first in line for that service. But you've hit on something really interesting, which is that this whole area of research, it's not just about building better AI.
Okay.
It's also giving us like a new way to understand our own judgment,
Oh.
how
Mhm.
we make decisions.
So it's like AI is like holding up a mirror
That's that way, yeah.
and being like, look at yourselves, humans.
Right.
Look at all your inconsistencies. I'm writing that down.
It's profound stuff.
Yeah.
It really is. Okay, so enough deep thoughts for now. Let's get back to like the nuts and bolts here. What are some of the ways that these LM evaluators are actually being used out there in the real world?
So one area where they're showing a lot of promise is in evaluating summaries.
Okay.
And I think we can all relate to this, right? Like we are just inundated with information these days, news articles, research papers, these endless email chains.
Oh, tell me about it.
So LLMs are now being used to automate that process of summarizing all that text and judging how good those summaries are.
Okay, that I can get behind. I am always like 3 articles behind on whatever I'm supposed to be reading for work. But how does an LLM even decide if a summary is any good? What are the criteria there?
Right. Well, that's where those different scoring methods we talked about earlier come in. So, for example, some researchers are using that direct scoring approach, right?
Right.
Where you have the LLM look at a summary and give it a rating on things like factuality, like how well does it capture the main points of the original text, even things like writing quality.
So it's like having like an army of AI teaching assistants,
Exactly.
just grading essays on this massive scale. I mean, sign me up.
Yeah.
Although I guess some poor human has to probably grade the AIs eventually, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's not quite as simple as just letting the AI run wild and decide whatever it likes.
Right.
A lot of the research here focuses on aligning those LLM evaluators with human judgments. So sometimes that means training them on data sets where you've got human experts who have already rated or ranked different pieces of text.
Okay, so it's like showing the AI a bunch of good summaries and a bunch of bad summaries and saying like, learn from this, young grasshopper.
Precisely, yeah. And what's really interesting is that the research shows that these LLMs, they're actually getting really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
Like in some cases, they're even able to pick up on these really subtle nuances in writing quality that traditional methods that just looked at, word counts and things like that, they would miss completely.
Okay, color me impressed. But I also have to ask, what could possibly go wrong, right?
Right.
With great power comes great responsibility or whatever.
There's always a flip side, right?
Yeah. What are the challenges? What are the potential downsides of basically handing over the judgment reins to AI?
Well, you've hit on a really crucial question there because like any technology, LLM evaluators, they have their limitations.
Okay.
And I'd say one of the biggest challenges is this risk of bias creeping in.
Okay.
Because just like human judges, LLMs, they can be influenced by biases that are present in the data that they were trained on.
Right. So we're not magically wiping away human bias just because we're feeding it into an AI, right?
It doesn't magically disappear, unfortunately.
Darn it. So we could end up with these LLM evaluators that prefer certain writing styles or topics or even reinforce existing stereotypes without us even realizing it.
That's the danger, and it's something that researchers are very, very aware of.
Right.
And so one of the approaches to try to mitigate that risk is to focus really heavily on the training data, making sure that it's as diverse as possible.
Fair.
Exposing these AIs to a wide range of different perspectives, different writing styles, different genres, you name it.
So kind of like how in a jury, you want to have people from all different walks of life. Right?
Exactly. The idea is that the more representative that training data is, the less likely it is that the LLM is going to, latch on to these harmful biases or even perpetuate them.
Okay.
But it's not a perfect solution by any means. And this whole issue of bias in AI, it's a huge area of ongoing research.
Yeah, it's like we're walking this tightrope between the amazing potential of this technology and the very real risk of messing things up even worse.
Yeah.
So what are the other safeguards that are being put in place? How do we make these AI judges accountable, right?
That's the key class.
It can't just be the AI decided this.
Right.
We need to know why.
Exactly. And I think transparency is a huge part of that. One of the criticisms of LLMs more generally is that they can be a bit of a black box.
Okay.
We don't always understand how they're arriving at their conclusion.
So we're just kind of trusting that they know what they're doing.
Right. Which, might be okay in some contexts, but when you're talking about something as important as, evaluating news articles or educational materials, it's not really enough, is it?
Not really.
So there's this big push now to make these LLM evaluators more interpretable.
Okay.
So researchers are developing these techniques to try to understand the AI's reasoning. Can we identify the factors that are influencing its judgments? Can we see if there are any biases in there?
Okay.
And, ultimately, can we make that whole evaluation process more transparent?
So it's like giving the AI judge not just the gavel, but like a microphone as well, so they can explain their reasoning.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, I think for these LM evaluators to be truly effective, they need to earn our trust. And that trust comes from understanding not just what they decide, but how they got there.
It's like we're basically writing a whole new rule book for AI, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But it also like makes you realize, wow, we are just at the very beginning of all this. There's so much we still don't know. Speaking of unknowns, one thing that I thought was really interesting in Jan's post was this idea of fine-tuning LLM evaluators. What is that? How does that even work?
So you can think of fine-tuning as kind of like you're taking a general-purpose LLM evaluator and you're giving it specialized training to become an expert in a very specific domain.
Yeah.
It's like imagine you have a judge who's really knowledgeable about the law in general.
Okay.
But then, you want them to specialize in, say, patent law.
Yeah, okay.
So fine-tuning is kind of like sending that judge to patent law school.
Okay, so we're taking that already really like intelligent AI and we're giving it even more specialized knowledge.
Right.
What does that actually look like in practice?
So, for example, let's say you're building an LLM evaluator specifically to look at summaries of medical research papers.
Okay.
So you might start with a general purpose LLM, but then you would fine tune it on this massive data set of medical research papers, right? And ideally that data set would include annotations from, actual doctors who are saying, yes, this summary is accurate, or no, this one missed the mark.
Gotcha.
And by training the LLM on that specialized data, you're basically teaching it to be much better at evaluating summaries in that particular domain.
So it's like sending our AI judge to med school. I can see how that would be like super useful.
Yeah.
And I imagine this fine-tuning thing, this is how we get those really specialized LLM evaluators, right? Like for very specific tasks.
Exactly. And researchers are exploring this for everything from, evaluating code to assessing like the creativity of marketing copy.
Wow.
I mean, the possibilities are really pretty mind-blowing, but it is worth noting that fine-tuning, especially for those very, very niche applications, it can be a pretty resource-intensive process.
Okay.
You need a lot of computing power. You often need access to these very large, specialized data sets. So it's not something that, just anyone can do in their garage.
Right. It's still pretty high level stuff. One of the things that I keep thinking about as we're going through all of this is that, it seems like the line between who's judging and who's being judged is getting a little blurry,
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, it's like as LLMs are getting more powerful, they're also becoming more and more involved in the process of evaluating other LLMs.
Right.
So you've got LLMs that are generating text, other LLMs that are evaluating that text, and then even like LLMs that are being used to generate prompts to like further test or challenge other LLMs. That's a lot.
It's LLMs all the way down.
It really is. It's like this AI feedback loop, with each generation of LLMs kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible, both in terms of like their own creativity and in how we even measure that creativity.
It's a fascinating dance they're doing, isn't it?
It really is. It makes you wonder, like, where does it end?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one that, I don't think we have a definitive answer to, but I think it raises these really profound questions about, what does it mean for something to be intelligent? What does it mean for something to be creative?
Totally.
And, if an AI can create something that another AI recognizes as brilliant, but we as humans, we can't even fully grasp it, does that make it any less brilliant?
Okay, that's going to keep me up at night. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. Expert speaker, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me.
Yeah.
I feel like my brain just got a serious workout.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, if you want to go even deeper on this, and I know you do because you're all AI nerds like us,
Obviously.
definitely check out Eugene Jan's blog post. It's a really great starting point for exploring this whole world.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll all have our own like personal LLM evaluators, right? Like just following us around, telling us what to read, what to watch. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and as always, happy diving, everyone.